Have you ever been looked down upon just because you weren't dressed in luxury? Ava Morgan, a young woman working as a waitress in a busy restaurant. No one paid attention to her. No one listened to her. But when Ava smiled and kindly served a customer whom the entire staff had deliberately ignored, she unknowingly awakened a hidden force. Because that man was none other than the founder of the entire restaurant chain. And from that moment on, a battle began. An ordinary employee would become the one to bring down a toxic system, where favoritism, deceit, and threats had once been the unspoken rules. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a journey of how someone cast aside, rose to lead. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to update our latest videos. The bell above the door rang out amid the dinner rush at Sizzle Point Diner, blending into the clatter of grills, the flurry of shouted orders, and the chatter of customers. Ava Morgan, wearing a once white apron now faded with time, weaved through tightly packed tables, balancing 3 steaming hot plates. Sweat beaded on her forehead. She had no time to rest, wasn't allowed to rest. Her mother was in the ICU, and her younger brother, Noah, was struggling through his first year of college. The tips from this job, however small, were what kept her family from collapsing. At the register, Rachel Stone, a longtime employee, was chatting animatedly with Brent Cooper, the bartender. Neither of them paid any attention to the new customer who had just walked in. A middle-aged man, dressed simply in a dark button-up shirt and khakis, carrying nothing but a calm gaze. Ava only caught sight of him while handing a receipt back to a family. She noticed he had been standing there for nearly a full minute, and no one had bothered to acknowledge him. Rachel glanced sideways, smirked at Brent, and muttered sarcastically, "Looks like the type who orders a glass of water and camps out all day." Brent chuckled. Ava pressed her lips together. She knew the unspoken rule here: prioritize customers who look wealthy, ignore the ones who don't. That rule came straight from Clint Davison, the restaurant's manager, and anyone who broke it paid the price. But Ava couldn't just walk away. Even though she was exhausted, even though she knew she might get reprimanded, she still approached, offered a polite smile, and gently said, "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Sizzle Point. Would you like to sit by the window or somewhere quieter?" The man gave a slight nod, his eyes showing a flicker of surprise, not because he was greeted, but because it had taken this long for anyone to notice him. "You're the first person to speak to me since I walked in," he said, his voice calm. Ava led him to an empty table by the window, handed him a menu, and poured him a glass of cold water. No theatrics, no false charm, just basic respect, the kind everyone deserves. As she turned and walked away, she didn't see the way his eyes followed her, sharp, contemplative, as if committing her every gesture to memory. He wasn't just any ordinary customer, but Ava, in that moment, was simply a waitress following her conscience. A quiet storm was brewing, and Ava had just lit the match. Without knowing, she'd be the one to face its full force. Less than 5 minutes after Ava served the strange man, Clint Davison, the evening shift manager, stepped out of the office with a stiff gait and eyes sharp as blades. He didn't say a word. He simply stood behind the bar, arms crossed, watching. The atmosphere in the diner tightened. Brent nudged Rachel lightly with his elbow, and both immediately straightened their expressions. Ava was still busy delivering plates to table 6 when she felt a chill crawl down her neck. She glanced quickly toward Clint, and just as she expected, he was staring directly at her. That look needed no words. It was filled with displeasure, a silent threat Ava had grown all too familiar with since working there. She didn't need to hear it to know. You just broke the rules. As the rush died down, Clint made a subtle hand gesture, a slight nod but full of authority. Ava understood. Break room. Now, inside the cramped room behind the kitchen, Clint shut the door smoothly but with unmistakable intimidation. He didn't sit. He leaned against the filing cabinet, the yellow overhead light casting harsh shadows across the stern lines of his face. "What do you think you're doing, Ava?" Ava clenched her fists, steadying her voice. "I just served a customer who was waiting." Clint let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "That customer wasn't the type we prioritize, you know that. I believe all customers should be treated the same." The room went dead silent the moment her words landed. Clint stepped forward, close enough for Ava to see the fury flicker in his eyes. "This isn't a damn ethics class, Ava. This is a restaurant. We serve people who can pay or tip well. People like him just take up space and waste our time." Ava wanted to argue, but she swallowed her words. In her mind flashed the image of her mother lying in the ICU, arms full of IV lines. Her brother Noah, hunched over exams while his wealthier classmates laughed nearby. Clint saw that. He saw her vulnerability, and stepped right on it, without mercy. "I'm warning you this time. Next time, I can't guarantee your job will still be here. And trust me, no one out there's gonna hire a principled waitress who doesn't understand profit." Ava only bowed her head, lips pressed tightly together. She didn't say a word. Then she walked out of the room, returning to work as if nothing had happened. But inside she knew a trap had just been set. And Clint Davison wasn't going to wait long to tighten it. At the table by the window, the neon light from the Sizzle Point Diner sign reflected off the frosted glass tabletop. The middle-aged man, dressed simply in an old shirt and a worn-out jacket, was eating a double burger, crispy fries, and sipping a black coffee served by Ava. He wasn't in a rush. Every bite was taken slowly, contemplatively. But his eyes, sharp and perceptive, missed nothing. He saw how Brent spilled water without apologizing to the customer. He saw how Rachel prioritized the well-dressed patrons while ignoring the more modest ones. He saw Clint standing near the kitchen, doing nothing, yet watching like he was the sole judge of who deserved to be served. And he saw Ava, the petite girl with tired eyes but never lacking respect, the only one who asked, "Would you like a refill on your coffee, sir?" As Ava returned to clear the table next to his, he spoke up softly, just loud enough for her to hear. "How long have you worked here?" Ava paused slightly, then smiled. "Almost a year. Long enough to understand how things work." The man nodded and took another sip of his coffee. "It's hard, isn't it?" Ava didn't respond immediately, but then she gave a small nod. "I need this job. Not many other options." His gaze softened, still sharp but carrying a different depth, the kind of depth that comes from someone who's seen through many layers of pretense in life. "Thank you for not judging me by how I look." "I'm just doing what everyone should do," Ava replied, bowing her head slightly. The man set his coffee cup down. This time, his smile no longer carried an air of testing. It held a promise. Something was being set in motion, quietly but with certainty. "You just scored a bigger point than you realize, Ava." Ava froze. She hadn't told him her name. But when she looked back, he was already standing, leaving behind a clean receipt. No tip, no note, just a knowing glance before walking out. In the distance, Clint watched the scene unfold from behind the office door, his eyes filled with suspicion. As for Ava, she didn't know who she had just served, but deep in her gut, she sensed something was about to change. The next morning, Ava arrived at Sizzle Point Diner earlier than usual. She wanted to tidy up the order counter and get ready for the day, just like always. But the moment she stepped in, she saw Clint standing by the kitchen door, arms crossed, his face ice cold. Ava Morgan, into the office, now. She blinked, confused, not quite understanding what was going on. Clint slammed the door shut behind her and threw a piece of paper onto the desk. This is a written warning. The customer from yesterday, the middle-aged man, said he felt harassed because you approached him too much. I need you to sign it so we can handle it internally. Ava's mouth dropped open. What? I only served him like any other customer. He didn't complain. He even thanked me. Clint slammed his hand on the desk. Don't argue. This is an official warning. You broke the restaurant's rules by serving someone outside the priority list. Who do you think you are? Ava clenched the paper in her hand. Her heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. I'm not signing it. Because it's a lie. Clint narrowed his eyes, the look in them shifting from threatening to venomous. Then don't waste my time. You're fired, effective immediately. Ava stood frozen. I need this job. My mother's in the ICU. Not my problem, Clint cut her off, pulling out a thin envelope, Ava's incomplete paycheck, and tossing it on the desk. Gather your things and don't cause a scene. She stepped out of the room like someone who had just been hit with a bucket of ice water. Rachel Stone and Brent Cooper stood by the counter, both watching her with barely concealed smugness. Rachel even muttered, "That's what you get for serving strangers." Ava swallowed hard, no tears, just a hollow emptiness setting in. She untied her apron, folded it neatly on the counter, then quietly walked out of what had become more of a battlefield than a workplace. Ava walked slowly down the street, the cold wind slipping through her thin jacket as if mocking the weight of disappointment pressing on her shoulders. Fired for a ridiculous reason, punished for doing the right thing. She had just lost her only source of income, while her mother remained in the ICU and her brother Noah was preparing to pay next semester's tuition. The ringtone still echoed in her ears. She looked down at the screen. An unknown number. This is Damian Whitmore. The name made Ava freeze on the sidewalk. I think it's time we had a serious conversation. Who are you? Ava asked, still not trusting her ears. The man in the blue shirt, table 8 yesterday. The only one you served. Ava's heart skipped a beat. She remembered clearly, that face, that calm yet piercing gaze. I need to meet with you, not because of the meal, but because of what I saw at Sizzle Point. Meet me tomorrow at 9 a.m., Café Monarch, corner of 5th and Brookline. But why? Ava blurted out. Damian paused before answering, his voice steady but full of implication. Because you were the only one who treated me like a human being. And because Clint Davison just destroyed his own career without realizing it. The call ended before Ava could say another word. She stared at the screen, her heart pounding. Damian Whitmore, the name wasn't unfamiliar. He was the founder of the Sizzle Point Diner chain, but had stepped out of the public eye years ago. The media dubbed him the Shadow Tycoon, rarely seen in public. And yesterday, she had served him like anyone else. Ava stood frozen on the sidewalk as the cold wind turned into a light drizzle. No one could have guessed that the worst day of her life was about to unlock the door to an unthinkable turning point. Tomorrow, she would see that man again, not as a waitress, but as the one holding the key to an earthquake. The next morning, Ava sat by the window of Café Monarch, a quiet space tucked behind rows of old maple trees. The morning sunlight streamed through the glass, casting a soft but tense glow. She clutched her now cold coffee tightly in her hands, eyes fixed on the cafe door. And then he walked in, Damien Whitmore, no longer the modestly dressed man from the previous night. Today he wore a deep navy-tailored suit, no tie, yet every step he took carried a commanding presence that made the entire cafe fall silent. He nodded at the staff, then walked straight toward Ava, where 2 espressos had already been ordered. "You're right on time," he said with a slight smile. Ava nodded, her throat tight. The man sitting across from her was no longer just a regular customer, but the founder of the entire Sizzle Point Diner system. "Why am I here, sir?" she asked, trying to keep her composure. Damien leaned back in his chair, eyes locking onto hers. "Because I've seen enough. I saw how employees are trained to discriminate. I saw Clint standing there like royalty, while customers were split into those who walked on red carpets and those treated like they didn't exist." Ava remained silent. Damien continued, "You were the only one who didn't need to know who I was to serve me like a human being. No judgment, no ulterior motives. I once believed this system could run on its own, but I was wrong. And I need someone who can dismantle that from the inside." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a thick envelope, and placed it on the table. "In here is an official appointment letter. I want you to return to Sizzle Point, not as a server, but to lead. I want you to become the branch manager of the Houston location, with full authority to restructure and manage the team." Ava was stunned. "You must be joking. I've never studied management, I'm just—" Damien raised his hand to interrupt. "True leadership isn't learned in classrooms. It's learned through reality. And the truth is, you have qualities I haven't seen in anyone else I've hired: fairness, courage, and a clear sense of right and wrong." The atmosphere in the cafe seemed to freeze in place. "But Clint won't accept this." "Clint won't be there when you return," Damien cut in, his voice sharp as a blade. "I'll be going with you, and I'll make that decision in front of the entire staff." Ava looked at him, the man behind an entire empire, and knew he was serious. This wasn't charity. This was a summons. Damien stood just as politely as when he arrived. "Think about it. But if you want to change the thing that once hurt you, the door is open." And he walked out, leaving Ava alone, with an appointment letter on the table, like a ticket to the biggest battle of her life. 2 days later, on what seemed like an ordinary Monday morning at Sizzle Point Diner, no one expected the front glass doors to swing open with a shockwave. Ava Morgan walked in, no apron, no serving tray. She wore a crisp white shirt, black slacks, leather shoes, and a brand new name tag that read, "Ava Morgan, Branch Manager." Her expression was calm, but every step radiated fire. The entire restaurant froze. Brent Cooper, midway through scooping fries, went still. Rachel Stone dropped her spoon. And Clint Davison, the former manager, stood motionless, as if struck by lightning out of a clear sky. He stepped out from the office area, his voice sharp. "What are you doing here?" Ava smiled. "Working in a new position." Clint scoffed, striding toward her. "I didn't approve this. You were fired, remember?" Just as he was about to speak further, Damien Whitmore entered behind Ava, wearing a light grey overcoat, his piercing gaze dropping the room's temperature several degrees. And so were you. Remember that, Clint? The diner held its breath. Damien stepped forward, pulling a stack of papers from his jacket and placing them on the counter. Official decision. You are hereby terminated immediately for ethical misconduct, abuse of authority, and creating a toxic work environment. Clint stared at him, face drained of color. You can't do this. I have people above. Damien cut him off with a single look. You should leave before I forward your file to the legal department. 1 minute passed like a century. Clint clenched his jaw, shot a venomous glare at Ava, then growled, ripped off his apron, and stormed out of the diner under the stunned eyes of every employee. Rachel Stone and Brent Cooper stood frozen. The air was tight like a pulled wire. Damien turned to the rest of the staff. Starting today, Ava Morgan is in charge here. She has full authority to restructure, hire, discipline, and rebuild the values I once believed this place stood for. He paused, meeting each pair of eyes in the room. Anyone who doesn't feel aligned with this new spirit is free to leave now. No one is being forced to stay. No one moved. No one left. Ava stepped forward for the first time as a leader. I know many of you doubt me, and I didn't come here for revenge. I came to make things right. If you want a workplace that's fair and respectful, I'll build it with you from the ground up. But if you choose to stand against that, go ahead and try. Rachel bit her lip hard. Brent lowered his head. Damien gave a slight nod, looking at Ava as someone who had chosen the right successor. The door is open. Now it's your turn to step through it. And then he left, leaving Ava surrounded by eyes, half fearful, half curious, but one thing was undeniable. A new era had just begun at Sizzle Point Diner. Less than a week after Ava Morgan took over management at Sizzle Point Diner, troubling signs began to surface. At first it was small errors, wrong orders, receipts off by a few dollars, or customers missing side dishes they had clearly ordered. Ava, meticulous by nature, quickly noticed a pattern. The mistakes always occurred during the shifts of Brent Cooper and Rachel Stone. One evening, a longtime regular slammed his hand on the table in frustration. I've been coming here for 5 years and never got overcharged, until you changed managers. Ava stepped out, apologized, refunded the difference, and offered a free meal. But when she returned to the office, her eyes had lost all calm. She checked the POS system. Several transactions had been edited after the customers had already left. Some were even marked as voided, but the food had still been served. She replayed the internal security footage. During certain time slots, Rachel was seen at the cashier station despite not being scheduled. That night, Ava worked well past midnight. She pulled the full transaction history, POS system logs, and matched each entry to the employee schedules. One name stood out. The account B. Cooper had processed nearly all the suspicious edits. The next morning, she called Brent into her office. He walked in, avoiding her gaze. Brent, did you edit the receipts from last Thursday? I just fixed a few mistakes, that's all. I mean, what would you know about how things are really done around here? I'm not judging, Ava said calmly, turning her laptop screen toward him. I'm presenting data. The logs were clear, timestamps, actions taken, login credentials, and wide-angle camera footage showing Brent alone at the register, altering each ticket. Brent paled. He stammered. I was just following Rachel's lead. She said we had to rebalance things. Said you were messing everything up. I didn't mean to. Ava remained silent, her eyes fixed on his panic-stricken face. And what about Clint? Brent swallowed hard. Clint started it. Before he was fired, he told Rachel to keep indirect control. They still meet after hours. I just got pulled in. Ava closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her stare was sharp as a blade. I don't care whether you were pulled in or walked in willingly. But if you want to keep working here, you have to choose. Stay a pawn or stand for the truth. Brent lowered his head. He said nothing, but Ava knew. A link in the chain had broken. She rose and walked into the dining area, scanning the room of customers enjoying their lunch. They had no idea that behind the polite smiles of service, a silent war was burning. And Ava knew this wasn't over, because the real threat was still lurking in the shadows. 3 days after confronting Brent, Ava Morgan could feel the shift in the air at the diner. Outwardly, operations seemed smooth, but underneath, the scent of defiance lingered. Brent had started to distance himself from Rachel. He no longer whispered with her at the register, nor did he, coincidentally, show up beside her during critical moments. But that very silence made Rachel suspicious. She began tightening control over the staff, especially the newer ones, like Jasmine Lee, a young, polite, and enthusiastic cashier. One evening, Jasmine knocked on Ava's office door, her face pale. "Manager Morgan, I don't know if I should say this, but I think something's wrong." Ava gestured for her to come in. Jasmine stepped in nervously and began to speak, voice trembling. "Yesterday, Rachel told me to adjust a ticket, said it was a regular who tips well, so don't worry about it. I refused. After that, she said, if you want to keep working evening shifts, you'll do as you're told." Then, I overheard her on the phone. She was talking to a man. I heard his name, Clint. The name struck Ava like a slap of cold air. Clint Davison, the former manager, was supposed to be long gone. But now he wasn't just present. He was orchestrating from the shadows, pulling strings from behind the curtain. Without delay, Ava accessed the internal call log, a feature she had quietly enabled on the back-office system. There it was, a call lasting 11 minutes from the prep kitchen phone to an unlisted number marked CD.01. The timestamp matched exactly with the window Jasmine reported. There was no longer any doubt. Ava compiled a full report and sent it to Damian Whitmore, who had been monitoring the situation closely. She attached everything: system logs, Brent's recorded statement, and Jasmine's handwritten testimony. Less than 20 minutes later, Ava's phone rang. Damian's voice was low, cold, and resolute. "You did well, but now it's time to act." "To act how?" "We can't just pull the weeds and leave the roots. You've found the root. Now rip it all out. Prepare for a public confrontation. I'll be there." Ava hung up, heart pounding. Clint, the man who had once cost her a job, nearly broke her spirit, had never truly disappeared. He'd merely moved from the spotlight to the shadows. And now, he was about to be dragged back into the light. Ava clenched her fist, eyes fixed on the restaurant windows where customers continued their meals in blissful ignorance. They had no idea the real battle was just beginning. That night, Ava Morgan finished her shift later than usual. The restaurant was empty, its dim lights casting a soft glow through the windows. She locked the front door, tightening her worn coat around her as the icy night wind swept through the deserted street. As she reached the parking lot, a chill ran down her spine. A grey sedan was parked in the far corner, unfamiliar. The headlights were off, but Ava could feel someone watching her from inside. She quickened her pace. Just as she opened her car door, her phone buzzed. a call from an unknown number. Ava answered cautiously. "Hello?" A low, unfamiliar male voice came through the line. "You're playing a dangerous game, Ava Morgan." She froze, her heart pounding. "I don't know who you are. You don't need to, but if you want your mother's treatment to continue peacefully and your little brother to avoid any accidents on his way to school, then you'll step down from the position you don't deserve." Ava's grip on the phone tightened, her hands shaking. Before she could respond, the line went dead. She spun around. The grey sedan had vanished. She only caught a glimpse of its taillights disappearing into the shadows. When she got home, Ava checked every lock on the door. Inside, her mother lay asleep, the soft hum of the breathing machine filling the room. Noah, her younger brother, sat at the table studying, headphones on, blissfully unaware that his sister had just received a real chilling threat. Ava collapsed into a chair, her heart still racing. She opened her voice recording app. The entire call had been captured, thanks to the software she had installed after Brent's confession. She couldn't go to the police, not yet. There wasn't enough evidence, but she had planned for this. Ava backed up the audio file to 3 different cloud services and sent a copy to Damien Whitmore with a brief message. "Clint is striking back." Damien replied almost immediately. "He's crossed the line. Stay safe. I'll handle the rest." Ava turned off the screen. She stood, drew the curtains, and walked back to her mother's bedside, gently placing her hand on her forehead. Warm, peaceful. But in that moment, Ava felt no fear, only fury. He had dared to touch her family, and now he would pay. That morning, the atmosphere at Sizzle Point Diner was tense as a tightrope. All staff arriving early were instructed to gather in the back meeting room. Ava Morgan, dressed in a simple black blazer, sat in front of a large screen, her expression calm but unwavering. Brent Cooper sat beside her, pale-faced. A few employees glanced at him with mixed emotions: pity, anger, suspicion. Rachel Stone stood against the wall, arms crossed, a sneer curling at the corner of her lips. Clint Davison had yet to appear. Ava stood, her voice steady but firm as it cut through the silence. "I've asked you here this morning because the truth needs to be brought into the light." On the large screen, Ava played footage from the POS system, showing Brent logging in and manipulating order entries, adjusting prices, switching items, and adding unclear surcharges. She continued, "Brent has admitted to this, but he didn't act alone." Brent took a deep breath and stood. Under the weight of dozens of eyes, he spoke. "I was threatened. If I didn't do it, I'd be fired. Just like Ava was. The person who ordered me to do it was Clint Davison." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. Rachel Stone immediately stepped forward, voice sharp and defensive. "Lies. She set him up. No one's going to believe this crap." Ava didn't respond. She simply pressed play on an audio recording. "Sabotage orders. Upset the customers. Every mistake has to land on Ava. Got it?" It was Clint's voice, clear, calculated, and incriminating. A wave of shock washed over the room. At that moment, the door swung open. Damien Whitmore entered, adjusting the collar of his blazer, his eyes cutting through the chaos like a blade. He looked at Rachel first. "Ms. Stone, not only are you terminated, but I've already forwarded all transaction records and Brent's statement to our internal audit team and legal counsel. System manipulation of this kind can lead to criminal investigation." Rachel turned pale, her voice trembling. I didn't know." Damien turned to Ava, then addressed the entire team. "I am the founder of Sizzle Point. And I'm here today to uproot the rot that Clint Davison embedded in this place. He looked directly at Ava, voice calm but firm as steel. You did well. Now let me take care of the rest. Ava nodded. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but because the battle had reached its final act. The small meeting room of Sizzle Point Diner was nearly out of seats. Every staff member, from head chefs and cashiers to janitors, had been summoned at Ava's request. Warm yellow light fell on the tense faces across the room. On the large screen behind Ava, a list of altered transactions played one by one, tampered timestamps, inflated bills, incorrect charges. Alongside these was an audio recording of Brent confessing that it was Clint who orchestrated Ava's sabotage from behind the scenes. No one spoke, but the silence itself felt like an explosion waiting to detonate. Rachel Stone sat frozen, her fists clenched tight. "Don't believe a traitor," she shouted. "I didn't do anything." Ava hadn't even responded when the door swung open. A figure stepped in. It was Damien Whitmore. No one had expected him to show up for this meeting. But there he stood, his cold gaze sweeping through the room like a blade slicing through deception. "You're not just fired, Rachel," Damien said slowly. "You're under financial investigation." Rachel went pale, stammering, "You don't have any proof." Damien didn't reply. He raised his hand. A technician hit play on another audio clip. Clint Davison's voice rang out, clear and incriminating. "Let the orders go wrong, the customers blow up. That's even better. Push Ava into the ground. When upper management sees the chaos, they'll beg me to come back." All eyes turned toward the doorway. Clint was standing there. The arrogance he once wore like armor was gone. But instead of remorse, he walked in with a half smirk on his face. "These childish games won't bring me down. I've worked this system too long to be pushed out by some degreeless little girl." Damien turned to face him fully, his voice dropping in pitch. "You once had a career, and you burned it all for pride and greed. I already fired you from Sizzle Point, but today I'm declaring this. You will never work in any branch under Whitmore Holdings again. I will personally submit your report to the Georgia Department of Finance." No one spoke. Rachel stood like a statue, paralyzed. Clint snarled, holding on to the last shred of ego. "You'll all collapse without me." Ava met his eyes, calm and unflinching. "Number, we're rising. Because you're gone." Clint stood in silence for a few seconds, then turned and left, his eyes burning with hatred. The door shut behind him, closing the chapter on a dark era. Ava stood at the center of the room, not the frightened waitress she once was. She had climbed from the depths into the center of the light, and she wasn't done yet. The next morning, Atlanta's skies were still, but inside Ava Morgan a storm was brewing. She sat in her freshly cleared office, no longer heavy with Clint's corrupt authority, but lighter, almost renewed. On the desk in front of her sat a single envelope, neatly placed, an official offer to assume the role of regional director, overseeing all 5 Sizzle Point branches across Georgia. Beneath the letter was Damien Whitmore's signature, and a handwritten note. "A true leader doesn't need a degree to do what's right. I didn't choose you for your resume. I chose you for your heart and your spine." Ava read it over and over. She had once been the overlooked server, forced to swallow injustice, then rose to become the one who stood for truth. But managing an entire region, could she do it? Her eyes drifted to a photo frame on the desk, a picture of Noah and their mother taken on her mom's 60th birthday in the hospital. In it, the 3 of them were smiling. even though they had nothing then except hope. Ava clenched her fists. Every decision she'd made, from the night she served a stranger to the moment she dared defy Clint, was never about position. It was about dignity. For the good, honest people no one else defended. And now, as this door opened, she finally understood. Power exists to protect, not to dominate. That afternoon, Ava met Damien at a quiet cafe, the same place where they first crossed paths. Damien wore a light jacket, sipping espresso. He looked up as she approached. "Have you made your decision?" he asked, his voice soft, not pressing. Ava didn't sit right away. She looked out the window where the city was easing into a new season. "I didn't study business. I've never managed a team. I don't have the kind of credentials people expect." Damien smiled, saying nothing. "But I have something they don't. I know what it feels like to be overlooked, to be pushed aside, to be invisible. And I won't let a single employee live like that under my leadership." She looked him into the eyes. "I accept." Damien nodded, his eyes gleaming as if he could already see the future. Then Georgia's about to change. And Ava Morgan, once fired for choosing compassion, now stood poised to transform an entire system. One choice, one beginning, one declaration. I wasn't born to bow. I was born to lead. 3 weeks after accepting the position of regional director, Ava Morgan began her first rapid reform tour across the 5 Sizzle Point Diner locations in Georgia. Each restaurant was a battlefield, each employee a story. But Ava didn't arrive as someone barking orders. She came as someone ready to listen. At Clint's former branch, where it all began, the atmosphere had transformed completely. Shift schedules were now organized fairly, based on ability and staff preference. An anonymous feedback system was launched, allowing employees to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. Discrete surveillance cameras were installed, not to monitor, but to detect and prevent harassment and covert discrimination. The weekly team meetings didn't start with performance reviews, but with 2 questions. Do you feel safe here? Do you believe your voice will be heard? Brent Cooper, once an accomplice to Clint's sabotage, was retained. After taking responsibility and assisting in the internal investigation, he expressed a deep desire to start over. Ava gave him that chance, and he didn't let her down. Brent became the first to sign up as a new hire trainer and even founded an internal support group called Transform from Within, dedicated to helping employees heal from the toxic culture of the past. Jasmine Lee, the once timid cashier, was now assistant manager at the Midtown branch. She said, "I used to think I'd always just be the girl carrying trays. Now I'm the one carrying the team." Meanwhile, Rachel Stone and Clint Davison weren't just fired, they were prosecuted. Damian Whitmore, in collaboration with the Internal Audit Division, submitted evidence of financial fraud, abuse of power, and conspiracy to sabotage operations. The lawsuit proceeded publicly. Clint's name no longer appeared on any management board, but in the blacklist of the service industry. Damien gave Ava full authority to lead. "Rebuild it from the roots," he said, "and if you are the root, the tree will never fall again." Ava rebuilt Sizzle Point's culture on 3 core values: kindness, transparency, courage. All new hires would undergo a 3-week training program, not just in customer service, but in values. They wouldn't just learn how to upsell. They'd learn how to recognize when justice is being compromised behind the scenes. From a crumbling system, Sizzle Point was slowly becoming a symbol. Ava didn't need flashy press releases to declare that. Customers knew, employees knew, and even those who had once walked away started coming back. "The name Sizzle Point used to make me cringe," one employee said. "Now it makes me proud." Rebirth doesn't begin with a new logo. It begins with the hearts of people brave enough to do what's right, even in silence. Ava wasn't just fixing a broken system, she was restoring the reason good people stay. On the first morning of a new month, sunlight filtered through the trees, glinting off the front windows of a Sizzle Point Diner branch in the quiet town of Savannah, Georgia. Outside the restaurant, Ava Morgan stood silently for a few seconds. In her hands was a new scheduling chart, not just a rearrangement of shifts, but a blueprint for a completely reimagined way of running the entire location. On her shoulders rested the responsibility of overseeing 5 branches, with nearly 70 employees placing their trust in how she leads. And in her heart lived something that had never faded: the memory of being fired simply for doing the right thing, for serving one person with dignity. The glass door opened. Ava stepped inside. Some employees looked up from behind the kitchen counter. A few recognized her from the media coverage of the Atlanta scandal. Others only knew that today a new boss was arriving. But when Ava smiled and said, "Good morning, everyone, I'm Ava, and I'm here to make sure no one is ever silenced again," all the uncertain glances began to soften. Her mother had been discharged from the hospital. Ava had visited her the night before. She was still weak, but her eyes were bright with pride. "You don't need to be the strongest," her mother said. "Just be strong at the right moments." Ava had hugged her tightly. For the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. Noah had been accepted into Georgia Law School. He texted her, "I'm going to learn how to protect people, the way you did. Next time someone tries to force a false signature, I'll be the one filing charges." Ava had laughed. The boy who once feared public speaking now dreamed of becoming an attorney. That's the miracle of believing justice is something worth living for. Damian Whitmore sent Ava a short email. "I didn't create a successor. I just helped her realize she'd always been one. Proud to have believed in you. DW." That afternoon, after training her first team, Ava stood on the second-floor balcony of the branch. Below, young staff members cleaned, chatted, and laughed, as if they had never worked under a system of fear. One girl in a new uniform looked up and asked, "Ms. Ava, I heard you used to be a server in Atlanta." Ava smiled. "Not used to be. I always will be." Because the best leaders never forget where they came from. As the sun set over Savannah, golden light spilled across the red brick walls of Sizzle Point. Ava closed the glass door behind her, gave the shift board one final glance, then placed her hand on the lock. From a server who was fired for doing the right thing, Ava Morgan had become a symbol of quiet courage and the power of compassion. And this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. A new door opened. By a true leader. Ava Morgan was once fired simply for treating a seemingly ordinary customer with fairness. She had bowed her head, endured in silence, for her family, for survival. But it was precisely her kindness, her quiet determination, that led her to be chosen, to be trusted, and to be empowered. From an anonymous server, Ava became a regional director. Not because of credentials, not because of reputation, but because she dared to do what was right, even when no one stood by her. She didn't just take down a bad actor, she dismantled a broken system and rebuilt it on fairness, transparency, and humanity. Never underestimate someone just because they're quiet. Sometimes that silence is listening and preparing to change everything. If you've ever been dismissed, sidelined, or underestimated, leave a comment. We're here to tell your story. And don't forget to subscribe for more episodes. Where the forgotten become the game changers.